This is All Ears. I'm Everett Hopfner, pianist, new music explorer, and host of this podcast. On each episode of All Ears, you'll hear conversations with my musical friends, mentors, and the many people who inspire me. My guest for episode 22 is an innovative experimental cellist and performer, the one and only Seth Woods. Seth is probably one of the busiest people I know. He's in demand all over the world for his one-of-a-kind performances, incorporating electronic media, dance, movement, and visual projection, in addition to his cello playing. Seth is originally from the United States, and he's just returned to dual home bases in Chicago and New York City after several years of education and career development in Europe. Seth is also a member of the Chineke Orchestra, based in the United Kingdom. We'll discuss that project and many others in the interview, coming up right away. All Ears has been a pet project for me for almost a year now. I've so enjoyed reconnecting with dear friends and discussing the critical transitions and milestones in their musical development. Please explore the back catalog at everetthopfner.com. If you like what you hear, don't be afraid to reach out to the artists. We're all here to enrich our community. Help spread the word by subscribing to the show, leaving a review, or simply recommending the podcast to your friends. Thanks so much for your support. Seth Woods, thank you so much for joining me on All Ears and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I can't even imagine your origin story, Seth, because when I look at your career, it looks like you do so many things. Can we just start with early beginnings and just kind of see where we go from there?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that sounds great.
So where did you grow up?
I was born in Houston, Texas. Moved around just a little bit when I was quite young. I had lived in Atlanta, Georgia. Moved back to Houston. And it was in that period that I was introduced to the cello via Hollywood.
How did that happen?
I was watching a film, probably way too young to be watching this film, but it was The Witches of Eastwick, and Susan Sarandon, the actor, she played a cellist in the film outside of being a witch, but she was also a cellist in the film, and I think she was playing, the Arpeggione Sonata, I think now, if I remember correctly, from the film, and that it's a really intimate section, and it's quite intense, and before I know it, in the film, it's really Hollywood and over the top, and the strings start shaking more than they normally do and vibrating, and the cello starts smoking, and the cello explodes, and I was like, that's cool, I want to do that.
Did you have any music in your family, or how did you get your hands on a cello?
Well, the music was always there. My mother and father were major proponents of the arts, and my father was a singer, a jazz and gospel singer in Houston. And so from an extremely early age, his band, which started in our living room, would rehearse in their studio in the basement. And so the music was always there, and I would run down, and bang on the drums in between the sessions. And, so that's really how I got started. But coming to classical music was something totally different. My sister is a singer and a pianist. And so, she was always going off to lessons or going off to sing in this all-state choir and such. But for someone to then say, I want to play the cello, was very, different. That they weren't really sure, how to access that. So, I happened to be in a program at an elementary school in Houston called McGregor Elementary, and it was quite known for its arts and sciences programs. And it was there, like, I think on my first day, I think this is after I'd moved from Atlanta, that I was taken around to each room, to introduce you to different types of arts programs that you could possibly take part in.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd gone to Mrs. Parker's string room, and it was there that, mostly everybody, of course, was playing violin or they were playing recorder. And I didn't want that because it was just so high pitched, and it didn't resonate with me. But then I saw the instrument that I'd seen on the TV, and I said I wanted to play that. Of course, I was really tiny then, so they found a really, really like quarter size one for me to play. As you say, that's it, and so the rest is history.
So you were able to get access to an instrument right through your public school?
Yeah, exactly. So I had one of those heavy old black cases that was probably, 30 pounds heavier than I was, slugging that thing back and forth on the school bus, and which I think is where most people end up giving up on the instrument because the fact of just having to carry it. So I was able to just use an instrument there within the school, and I practiced on that. And, of course, you had, little, class recitals and end of the year recitals and such. That's kind of how I got started, and then it kind of progressed after that.
Seth, there's a lot of people, once they hit teenage years, adolescence, who they don't stick with the music thing. Why did you keep going?
My mother. Before high school, there's a very famous high school in Houston called the High School for Health Professions. And, it was my dream in some ways, somewhere hidden far back, it still is, to be in, an OBGYN. This I thought would be kind of my calling. But my mother had other plans. So, it came to a time when you'd apply for schools. Like there was entry examinations for both there, and then eventually the High School for the Performing and Visual Arts, where I did go on to study. And, she would not, I signed up secretly to take the examination, for the health profession school. And then she said, no, you can't go. I won't let you go. So I didn't end up going, which some could say, kind of crushed a dream. But in other ways, I think it allowed me to stick with something that she saw great potential in, that I could kind of continue going with. And maybe it was something that can kind of get me out and help me see the world, something I'd always dreamt of doing. So I'm forever grateful to my mother for continuously pushing me and, monitoring my practice sessions and making me go play for her every 30 minutes. To make sure that I understood exactly what I was doing on the instrument and understood the music and trying to convey that in a way, and trying to reach higher depth, heights.
When did it become clear to you that you wanted to study music, study it as a career?
That would have been in high school, I think. Somewhere in there. I think it was when I met the Eroica Trio. I had all their CDs at the time, when they were coming out, and I thought they was like, oh, they're doing something different. They were doing the classics, but they were also doing these amazing arrangements, of Piazzolla and such. And so it was, seeing them do what they do, and I thought, I could do this. Maybe I could have a career in music. I don't know. Even though, there was no one that kind of looked like me on the concert stages.
Seth, how does that feel like? Was it so extreme for you, even growing up in high school and stuff, that you were one of the few people of color in your scene?
Oh, yeah. It was definitely, I look back on it now, I can laugh about it, not wholeheartedly, I could say that. But at the time, it was very jarring and daunting. But in some ways, I always was, I'm not going to say the black sheep, but I was always different. I was different in not a bad way, but it was just outside of the norm. Outside of the normal model of what you'd expect to see when you look at a string orchestra, a student orchestra, let alone a professional orchestra or organization. I faced my my own forms of, discriminations through that process, and thank goodness for family and supportive friends. They've helped me get through all that, and remind me of who I am and what I came to do. And so, um, and so I've made the best of it, I think, thus far at 31 years of age now. And trying to kind of make my mark, in this world and make as much noise as I can and, try to help people in whatever way I can. Yeah.
Sure. Once you make the decision to go and pursue music at university, can you tell me about your path through your first post-secondary studies?
Well, I had a very interesting route. I started out at a really small liberal arts college in Ohio, and that didn't quite fit, so I left. And then I went to do a small bit of studying in Rome. And then I came back and I moved to Chicago. And I studied there at Roosevelt University at the Chicago College of Performing Arts. And there it was that I met quite a big influential teacher and now mentor and friend, Daniel Morgenstern, who at the time, until a few years ago, was the principal cellist of the Chicago Lyric Opera. And then I went on to New York City, and I studied at Brooklyn College, which is in Brooklyn, at a conservatory there. And I studied with Frederick Slotkin, who's a cellist of the New York City Ballet. His brother is Leonard Slotkin, the conductor. And then after that, I decided, maybe it's time to get out of New York. I was burnt out. I was doing a lot in my early start of the career was going quite well, and I was doing exciting things. But at the same time, I looked up and it was like 2 years down the road at some point, and I realized I haven't taken a vacation or holiday or a break, in 2 years. I've just kind of been going. Not that I haven't loved many of the things I'd done in New York and, and abroad while being based there. That couldn't be it for me. Because I always said I wanted to look back on my career and say that was fun and that was exciting and it wasn't stagnated. So I left. I left New York. I had known of quite well-known cellist and pedagogue, Thomas Demenge. And so I emailed him, and he said he was still teaching in Basel in Switzerland. I had never been. So I was invited to the auditions, and I went. Yeah, I went. Yeah.
And how was Basel as your home base? Like your first stop in Europe, how did it feel?
It was a complete and utter cultural shock. It was so different in every way. I had only been there once, and I was there for the audition. So my recollection of Basel, prior to officially arriving to live there and study there was almost nothing. So it was really beautiful, and you have the Rhine River that runs through the center and separates Old Basel from New Basel architecturally. And, there were a lot of cultural shocks, a lot of political things going on at the time while I was studying there, which resonated in some ways with issues happening then and still currently going on in America, as well as other countries. But I think I made the best of it, and I had a great mentor and I think friend now, Michael Svoboda, mostly call him Mike, the trombonist, who headed up the specialized master's program in contemporary music for chamber musicians and soloists.
Had you been doing a lot of contemporary music in New York before you did the Basel program?
I had. I mean, I was doing both at the time, but to the extent of what I'm doing now compared to then, it's kind of like light years away.
Why is your focus now so much more on the contemporary music aspect?
I should say, why not? I've come to the realization that, one that is involved in the arts, is making a career or life in the arts, should be a major proponent and advocate for the music of now, because it's something that reflects the society and world that we do live in currently. I don't know why there was such a shift. It may have come from, colleagues and mentors along the way. I had worked quite closely with pianist Ursula Oppens, and there's been so much written for her, and she's collaborated with so many great composers and artists in her career, and she was one that kind of helped introduce me to even more interesting composers that are kind of staples on the concert stage now. I got introduced to a lot of great new music and learned a lot of interesting extended techniques. And I got to work with some really great currently living older generation and younger generation composers. So I think that's kind of what helped push me to do more on the contemporary music side.
So when you finished up in Basel, you weren't quite finished with Europe yet. Why did you want to stay?
No, I think at the time I was like, oh, I'm leaving, I'm going back, because, it's kind of a love-hate with Basel in some ways. My first year was really tough. The second year was much easier. I started kind of branching out outside of just only knowing musicians and meeting other people. And, well, the rest is history now that I'm finished my doctorate. But, I ended up going on to Huddersfield, and it's quite a big epicenter, especially for the UK for contemporary music, and especially as far as academic research. There's a lot of interesting things coming out of there, and I think it was a good decision. And now looking back, years down the road after having completed this program.
So Seth, you maintained these home bases, first in Basel and then in Huddersfield, but just from knowing you a little bit, it seemed like you were jetting all over the world all the time.
I was.
And you have a program in France, you have a program in Belgium, and you have a program in China, and you have this thing here, and in Italy, and then here. So how do you end up building these amazing networks all around the world?
Well, some of it, just came from being at the right place at the right time, or, someone got sick and then they needed someone, soon-ish or very soon to step in, to sub out as a cellist in a chamber music setting, or it was something I was already working on from a specific composer that they were doing a portrait of his music, and I just happened to be an interpreter of that work, and I was available. Or eventually it parlayed into, they were inviting me specifically to present programs of new music that I was working on or projects I had been curating. I think the other part of it is just being myself, and being open to whatever. Just kind of, I kind of think of myself as a go-getter, and just everything in all at once, and just not taking no for an answer, or being scared to explore something different, or turning my nose up at a genre that I think may not be as worthy, or just doing only one thing all my life. Again, I say it's just kind of being in the right place at the right time, and trying to kind of keep expanding the net of my network, and kind of seeing what other people are doing, or enjoying, or really liking what other groups are doing and other players are doing, and trying to stay as relevant as I can out on the scene.
Of course, it's important to have the right attitude and these kind of things, but you have to be the person that they call. What do you think you've been doing right that puts you so high up on the list that people want to call you and have them work with you?
I think it's that I started early on when I was starting to commission works for myself instead of just playing everybody else's music. Because I wanted to. This sounds really kitsch, but I wanted to leave a legacy for myself, and also try to build more music for the cello in a way that kind of changed the face and ethos of it, and kind of telling it through in my own way. And so instead of just doing the standards that were already out there, I started early on. And I remember there's a cellist that told me, do you think that there's not already enough music out there that you need to create more? I'm like, well, of course. I was like, the times are changing, and each year, there's something new that's happening. There's new issues that are happening in the world, and we have to reflect those via our art forms. So I think one of the things that's kind of helped me is by doing the commissions, by meeting composers, by meeting other young or seasoned performers and interpreters, not only as musicians, but as actors and performance artists and dancers and choreographers, being flexible. I think that's the thing, and always wanting to do something more. I think that I think, at least for me, that's what's kind of helped me build a bridge of networks. Yeah.
My next question, Seth, is do you have a personal assistant?
I wish.
Well, this is a serious question though. Like, how do you manage, or how did you manage when you were doing doctoral studies and you know trying to maintain a career in Europe? What did you do, or how were you able to manage all of the logistics of things, all the flights, all the traveling, all the packing? How do you manage all of that, plus keeping your commitments at home?
I don't know. I mean, it was on me. I've gotten this question so many times, and I think it's just New York in one way prepared me for that, because I started like my first venture out as you could say a soloist, but just doing my own projects and not just being a sideman on everything, really doing something for me. Started there. And that I kind of learned trial by fire on how to do press kits, how to apply for and write grants, going into grant writing programs, doing publicity shots, and trying to learn the music at the same time. Oh, I was also going to school at the same time, full time. So I kind of learned a bit of it from living in New York, and with it being so fast paced. And then at this point now, it's like, for 2 years of the doctoral program, I was jet setting, like I feel like almost every other week to do something. And I learned to work in airport lounges and on planes, and and I think that's how I did it. And I didn't sleep a lot. That's the honest truth of it, not to embellish, but that's very honestly true. There was just so many commitments and so many things. And at some point, I decided that the projects that I would do in, given period, had to somehow feed back in some way to the work and research that I was doing at the time.
How long were you based in Huddersfield, Seth?
3 years. 3 years, yeah.
And what was your area of research?
It was performance research, dealing specifically with analyzing kind of gestural processes of musicians, looking at expressive and ancillary, so sound producing movement and non-sound producing movement from musicians, and using that as a way to kind of heighten one's understanding of their own kinesthetic functions. And then from there, in a very experimental way, working with digital age instrument builders to create a new work for cello and interactive interface.
Now, can you describe this interactive interface?
Yeah, it's a prosthetic spine. It's a part of a larger family of prosthetic instruments built by Joseph Malloch and Ian Hatwick at McGill University. And I'd seen it when I was in Paris, doing some work at IACOM. And I loved it, and I'd already heard about it in the early stages of it. And I got to finally meet the creators and the artistic team. And that's kind of how it started. And then I spent half a year, 2 different stints in Montreal, there in residence, researching and working.
So in a typical performance with these, Seth, are you playing your cello and you have this robot spine strapped to your back as well?
Yes, it's harnessed to me via a headband, and then there's a corset that I also wear, which the top and bottom of the instrument kind of hook in. They lock into those 2 different clips, and I wear it that way. And then I also play the cello with it, and then I also dance with it as well.
Seth, a few weeks ago, I saw you started posting quite a bit about the Chinico Orchestra, which you've just become involved with. Can you tell me a bit about this organization?
Yeah, well, it's a foundation and organization altogether. Within it's founded by principal double bassist of the Orchestra for the Age of Enlightenment, Chichi Manoku, who's an English musician based in London. And it was something that I think she was quite always dreaming of, finding a way to bring awareness and help provide a platform for musicians kind of African descent, Black or minority ethnic musicians in a way that kind of missing on the big concert stages, at least for classical music. We're comprised of mostly UK-based musicians, a lot coming from London, some from the north. Then we have a few others coming from Europe as well. This serves really as the first big professional orchestra made, entirely of culturally and minorities.
What was the feeling when you walked into the room for the first rehearsal with this orchestra?
The feeling, it was excitement. There was already so much buzz, positive and some negatives already, leading up, just from, social media and such, so I kind of carried some of that in, but at the same time, more so excitement, because this is going to be the first time, I was sitting next to, stand partners, some that looked exactly like me, and we were making music, because some say, should that actually be, should that make it feel any different? In some ways, based on your experiences, it's hard to say, should it not feel different? Because it will in some ways. Because of the first time you can look over or look around and you see kind of an orchestra and an ensemble foundation that's, that reflects society in many ways, and people, that you serve as a face to a younger generation, whether you know it or not, that may want to take a road or a journey in the arts, or families that may want their children or, or nieces or nephews or friends or whatever to join in on this crazy industry that we're in, but that's also very fulfilling. So it was really amazing, that first rehearsal to come in and everything. There was so much excitement. There was a great buzz, a positive buzz from everyone, ready to do something really exciting and prepare for this big debut that we're all, gearing up for.
Can you see your involvement with this orchestra from the eyes of 6, 7, 8-year-old Seth, when you were just saying how much you felt like an outsider back in Texas?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things. It's quite loaded, that living in Texas, and there's a lot of other things, about
Sure.
that. But yes, I only wish, that there was something like this, when I was coming up, early on, and for my mother to have seen that, my mother, my cousins, many of my family, they watched it. Because the concert was also streamed live. And so they were all cheering on and watching, because it was so monumental, to see something like this at, an all, orchestra, of beautiful brown people. So it was really amazing, and making more so, you have that aesthetic, that visual aesthetic, but at the heart of it is making great music at such a high level, and then looking also out into an audience that is completely multicultural, and they're all there supporting, and there's so much love in the audience. And I think I only wish that there was something like that when I was growing up, because then you have a face, you have an image, to show that, this is possible, something that maybe I would have loved to do or want to do, professionally. You have an example to connect with. I was telling friends and colleagues, the sounds and the excitement, the buzz coming from the audience alone, and you felt like you were at a rock concert. Yeah, there was hooting and hollering and whistling, and it was everything going on, and it was so great. It was like a really great ushering in of something that is going to be truly monumental and earth-shattering on the music scene, that will help change it for the good.
Awesome. Seth, I'm so excited about this orchestra and this foundation, and good luck with all of your efforts going forward to make this thing happen. I think it's really exciting.
Thank you.
Seth, we have a recurring segment on the podcast called the Mr. Rogers Delightful Person of the Day.
Okay.
Can you tell me about somebody who's helped you become the musician or the person that you are today?
The biggest, I would have to say, would be Daniel Morgenstern, and then the other would be Ursula Oppens. But Daniel, because I called him Danny, I came to him at a period when I was just kind of leaving school and not sure what's next, and there was just a lot of broken things just personally, and also as a musician, that kind of needed some healing. And he took me under his wing, and I studied with him, intensely. And I became a better musician, but also a better person, I think. Because sometimes it's really hard to navigate the world of being, in the arts, and specifically as being a musician, and trying to find a path for you. Because I think, with society, we are constantly being fed examples of, soloists and orchestral musicians. And sometimes those models don't necessarily work for everyone, or some of us try it and some of us do it. And some decide to go on to be those musicians, or fall in line with those models. And it does work, and some don't. And so he was a great proponent, by knowing his path. He didn't start out as an orchestral musician. And I really grew a lot, by working with him that first year. And then I've stayed in contact with him, over the years. And he still lives here in Chicago. I have to call him, actually. But he's been great. And he's been very encouraging and supportive of the work I've been doing, whether he knew exactly why I was doing the work with the spine or not. If he thought it was just, ludicrous that I was doing that or not. But he's really been, he's been excited about the work I've been doing in contemporary music as well. And it wasn't until after I kind of stopped studying with him and left New York, and I was in Basel, and that I kind of really truly came back to doing more classical music. Because I'd done so much rebuilding of my playing, technically and musically, with him. And really stripped it down and, started over to kind of really further solidify the bass. And I think through that, and through anecdotes and studies and, and stories, I became a better person, inside and out. Yeah.
Seth, are you somebody who's ever fit into a box?
People have tried to put me in there. But no, I don't think so. I always wanted to do something a little differently. And I think I continue to try to reinvent myself month after month, year after year. And I think inevitably I'm trying to figure out who I am along this journey. And I think I've changed a lot for the good, over the years, through kind of throwing myself into situations I never thought I'd put myself in, or maybe I didn't know at the time. So I'm always trying to kind of redefine who I am at that point in time, and kind of go for things that scare me, or that I feared in the past, because maybe, people wouldn't, they wouldn't get it, or they wouldn't enjoy it, or they think that's not what a cellist, in quotations, should be doing. So I try to push and bring a different voice to myself as a maker and an artist and a musician, and to those receiving it, or possibly will receive it.
You and I met once for one evening. That was that was the sum total of our time together. We were at a Christmas party together.
Yes.
And yet, as I listened to you talk, we've kept in touch on and off over the years since then. But what strikes me is that I think anyone listening to this, and anyone who's ever met you, you're not an easy person to forget. You leave such a strong impression, whether you try to help it or not. I think I just get the sense that you just are who you are, and that's going to pull the right people towards you.
I try to, surround myself with people that, that are positive, or I've learned, I should say, to surround myself with people that are positive and that support me, and I do the same for them, and try to just keep a good outlook on life, and try to just propel myself forward and upward.
Well, Seth, what a pleasure. This is such a joy to talk to you. Good luck with the transition going forward back in the States. And I'm sure we'll keep in touch. This has been an enlightening conversation, and I'm grateful to have had it. So thank you again for joining me on the show.
Thank you.
Alright, that is it for this episode of All Ears. Thank you so much as always for listening. Seth has a whole bunch of great content online, including videos of his interactive performances. Visit the show notes for this episode to check it all out. You can follow me on Twitter at evhopf, that's EVHOPF. For information about the show, you can follow at This Is All Ears. All Ears headquarters is found at my website, everetthopfner.com. Check out the archive for show notes and links about all my previous guests and for updated blog posts. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or Stitcher. And if you like All Ears, tell someone about it. Like the likes, tweet some tweets, share as much as you can. Alright folks, thanks again. All Ears will be back in December. We'll talk to you soon.